In this video, we're going to be I want to talk about morality. And I'm going to break it up into two segments. One, we're going to talk about macro subjective morality, which often looks like objective morality. And then micro morality, which is almost always seen as subjective morality. Alright, welcome back, everyone. That's going to be interesting in editing.
Part 1. Macromorality. The morality that we as a species tend to agree on as morally incorrect. That the majority of the populace agree that in our opinion, subjectively, that these things are objectively moral or immoral.
So, in macro morality, why do I, in a statement that I wrote once to alt-right Chick Micken, I said something along the lines of, in referring to rape, murder, child molestation, sometimes theft, lying is a little bit tricky. But I referred to it by saying that, yes, these are objectively immoral because it has been decided by the populace subjectively that it is objectively immoral things to do. So the society as a whole, subjectively, as an opinion, have decided that murder and rape, child molestation, are objectively morally incorrect. This is what I'm calling macro morality. I have not read Sam Harris's book, so if he said anything about this in his book, I don't know because I haven't read it. I came up with this on my own, so maybe we just have similar ideas. Don't know. Haven't read it. So macro morality, what I'm referring to as a broader spectrum, hence the word macro. So it would appear that when we talk about things like rape, murder, and molestation, and for the most part thievery, it almost seems like across the globe, across culture, from culture to culture to culture, these are acts that are almost the human race is universally opposed to. Does that mean that it's objectively immoral? No, absolutely not. We as a society, as these different cultures, as the human race, have come to the conclusion, we have come to the subjective conclusion that these particular incidences are objectively immoral. It's still subjective, we have decided, but 90-something% of the human race And when I say human race, there is no race but the human race. I do not categorize people by the color of their skin, and I can get into a race realism video at some point when I have the fucking time, but I don't have the time right now, so we're going to do this. Because I know the alt-right is waiting for that. And I have been looking into some interesting statistics on IQ. That's a different video. So 90, like a huge major percentage, whether they believe in the Abrahamic gods or not, it is pretty much universal that the human race agrees murder, rape, molestation, and theft, we're usually opposed to that, no matter what society you go to. You don't do those things. There are certain guidelines and bylaws and certain cultures that will permit you to do some of these things, but that's usually as a result of a reaction to another reaction that they don't like. We as a human species have subjectively come to this conclusion, though, that these are unacceptable acts, but we have decreed that they are objectively immoral. We can justify it. We understand the negative consequences behind murder. Life is finite, life is unique. Therefore, ending someone's life is about one of the biggest atrocities you can commit. You are taking something away from somebody that has no equivalent value. You cannot return it. You cannot take it back. It cannot be undone. It cannot be mimicked. It cannot be replicated. And even in bioengineering, if you were to clone a person, you cannot guarantee that you can clone the exact consciousness of that particular individual. I have no doubt in my mind if you were to make a clone of me, let's say, that clone would ultimately have a different consciousness than my own. We would not see ourselves as the same person. We would see ourselves as identical in a lot of ways, but ultimately we would not be looking through the same eyes and looking at the same world around us. We might think the same, we might have the same kind of peculiar behaviors, same intelligence rates, same looks, same tics, but ultimately we would not share a consciousness. Meaning that if my clone went and experienced an atrocious or an event that with extreme atrocities behind it that had the ability of life-altering means, that it would change that clone's consciousness, the way they perceive the world, it would not change my consciousness unless I went through the exact same event, making us unique. Life is unique. So we can justify murder is wrong. Subjectively, it is wrong, it is immoral. But the reason we say it's subjective morality is because it's just one of those things where it's so wrong. It is the biggest infringements of rights, liberties, and freedom you can possibly make. It is an infringement upon bodily autonomy. Rape is one of the most intimate, violent acts you can commit upon a person. You're literally inside them. You're literally becoming somewhat a part of them. It is so intrusive and invasive that it has the ability to permanently scar and damage a human being psychologically for the rest of their life. And we even look at things like child molestation as being even a higher tier of immorality than even rape itself. It's up there with murder. I think a lot of people perceive child molestation in the same light as murder. We view it as even more extreme than rape upon two adults. But we can justify these things. We can give a rational, logical justification, explanation, using facts and evidence to support why it is immoral. Lying is a tricky one. Lying is not universal. There are lies that you can make where you are manipulating a person's perception of reality. And when you do that, that is a horrible thing to do. When you lie, let's say, like pedophiles, they'll lie about what they do. No, never mind my past, forget about it, that never happened, ignore the stench underneath the floorboard, that is not a 3-year-old rotting corpse. They are manipulating your perception of reality to make you believe that something that ultimately isn't real is real. Saying that no, these atrocities didn't happen even though they did. They didn't commence even though they did. They did not engage in this act even though they did. And ultimately that has a very negative consequence. When you say that a country is producing weapons of mass destruction, you attack them, you destroy and cripple their economy and crumble their government overnight, and then say, oops, there's no weapons of mass destruction, and then if you were to come out and say, we knew that all along, you have ultimately engaged in a lie that is betrayed people and their trust and understanding of what they perceive to be reality. This makes you a monster. I don't know if this falls under the classification of macro morality, but I would definitely say that it is immoral. Whether you consider it subjectively immoral or objectively immoral, it is immoral. There is a justification behind why, using facts and evidence and logic, as well as rationality. I don't like rationality because you can rationalize anything. You can rationalize that Santa Claus is real, that ghosts are real, that God is real, that hell is real. You can justify those things. You can justify why why Jeffrey Dahmer rationalized why he did what he did. That doesn't make it logical. Although it is very interesting, you can be rational without being logical. You can be logical without being rational. Macro morality tends to be something that the human species as a whole, and you can even see it in animal species as well, that we have cohabitated with, such as like our domesticated animals like dogs and cats, is that they profess some kind of bond with their human owners. They wish no harm upon you. They don't like to do it. But when I talk about macro morality, it's usually something that we have subjectively as a society agreed that it should be objective morality. Something you should never do. No question about it. No ifs, ands, or buts. It is wrong, plain and simple, period, end of story, not up for debate. Nobody wants to have their life taken unless you're suicidal, but even then I think most of suicidal people would prefer that their life being taken falls into the element of their own hands and not the choice of someone else. This is macro morality. It is subjective, but we as a society have come to an agreement that we all subjectively agree that it is immoral, and so we have agreed to make it objectively immoral. And that is what I would define as macro morality, and why I make the statement that I had made.
Part 2. Micromorality. The morality of the individual is vast with many shades of gray. That morality is ultimately subjective, a man-made construct made possible by the inheritance of the mammalian brain, carrying us beyond the animal kingdom.
Alright, so micro morality. Well, this is where the lying gets a little tricky, because everyone lies. Lying is a cooperative act. We all, when we get lied to, it's because we are agreeing to be lied to. There are lies that are manipulative but have very, very low negative ramification. And then there's lying that we call white lies. For instance, do I look fat in this dress? No, honey, you look fine. Am I good at playing the guitar? Yeah, you're great. You're fantastic. I mean, the list goes on that. It goes on and on. So lying is a tricky one. But ultimately, I would say lying falls under micro morality, which is always subjective, because it depends on person to person. Anyone also that tells you that they never lie, immediately count them as a liar. It is a self-defense mechanism. It is built into us with an evolutionary process. In fact, it's even known that young babies will fake crying just to get attention from their mothers. This is participating in a form of lie. Everyone lies. Everyone. Oh, I lost it in the email. I got stuck in traffic. Things like that. And what we perceive as being an acceptable lie or an unacceptable lie it's very vast and vague, and it depends from individual to individual. It is highly subjective in how we interpret if the lie is immoral or not. Other things of subjective morality of the micro morality world would be like homosexuality. Yes, I'm saying that, Chick Micken and alt-right people on my channel. Homosexuality falls into the category of what I would call micro-morality. It is highly subjective, and it depends from person to person on what a person perceives as sexually acceptable or not in society, such as promiscuity, polyamory. These things tend to vary from person to person and how they view the world in various landscapes, different kinks, different ways of life. These are very subjective. And each person is going to have their own interpretation of what they consider to be moralistic and non-moralistic. And they will have justifications. They will have rationalizations. Ironically, they'll be based on some form of fact and evidence, but not always. I can make a logical argument based on facts and evidence of why you should not engage in scat. Scat is sexual fetish that evolves around shit and eating it sometimes. And I could say, well, you shouldn't do that because there's a lot of bacteria in that. There's a lot of toxic stuff in there because it's everything that your body is excreting. The color, the reason why your shit has color comes from the secretions of your liver. There's shit from your kidneys that your kidneys have filtered out. in it. There's stuff that your liver has filtered out. There's bile in it. There's a reason it's called toxic shock syndrome, and people can literally die from eating shit. However, I cannot ultimately tell a person not to do it because they are imposing no harm onto anyone else but themselves. It's like telling a fat person not to eat a chocolate cake because they could die of a heart attack. If they get joy out of it, who am I to judge? Who am I to say don't smoke cigarettes? It'll give you cancer. If you get joy out of it, it's your life. Do what you will. Don't smoke meth. It deteriorates the calcium deposits in your body. It destroys your central nervous system and literally depletes your brain. It specifically starts fucking up the pleasure center of your brain and your capability of forming coherent thought. I could say that all I like. People will do it anyway. They like the effect that it has. So you can see this micro-morality, these things of sexuality, social norms, societal norms, these are highly subjective. Morality itself is subjective, but at least for macro-morality, I can say that the majority of society agrees on macro-morality. It's still subjective, but since we predominantly agree, the vast majority of the human species agrees. We can call it objectively true. But when it comes to things like homosexuality, we don't all agree. We don't all agree that homosexuality is wrong. We don't all agree that water sports is wrong. And I can make a rational argument or a logical argument based on fact and evidence. Urine is 99.9% sterile. It has ammonia in it. It's very acidic. It's got salt. There's not a lot of bacteria or viruses in there that cause any harm. There is no harm done in water sports. You perceive it as gross because you were taught to believe that it was gross. It is a matter of your body eliminating some form of waste. And I can also tell you this. After you have sex, the reason why you want to urinate is because it's your body trying to keep you from having a urinary tract infection. It's a true story. Because it'll kill any viruses or bacteria that are left in your urethral canal after having sex. Your body also, like in males, there's a muscle that shuts off the bladder valve. This is why males wake up with an erection. It's your body trying to keep you from pissing while you're asleep. It does this because urine will kill your sperm. It's also why you pre-cum. The pre-cum is designed to get any urine out of your urinary tract before you ejaculate because the urine will absolutely destroy your sperm. It's actually antimicrobial. It's interesting knowledge, even though it is a waste matter. But your urethra canal is considered sterile. It's a sterile environment. Meaning not sanitary. Something can be sanitary and go in your urethral canal and cause all kinds of problems. If something is to go into your urethral canal, it is supposed to be sterile. Meaning absolutely no way, shape, or form that there is any microbial life on that thing going into your urethral canal. The anal cavity, not so much. There's a lot of bacteria in there. It is not considered sterile or sanitary. That is why you can take ordinary household objects and shove them in your anal cavity, and as long as they don't get stuck, you're fine. Although if you're shoving things in your anal cavity that aren't really meant to go in there, and they get stuck, and you go to the hospital and have them removed, you will probably get sent to the psych ward. I've heard this from a surgical nurse. They will probably send you to a psych ward if you put weird things in your bodily orifices and they get stuck and they have to remove them. You can put it. The anal cavity is capable of it. It's fine. Trust me. If somebody has fecal impaction, you know what you got to do. After we try enemas, stool softeners, and laxatives, the next step is gloving up and going in and getting it out. Trust me, I've been a CNA. I've had to do it. It sucks. So, also another aspect of micro-morality and why it's so subjective is smoking, non-smoking. Is it right or is it wrong to mandate this? Guns, abortion. All these things fall under the macro-morality because they're deeply subjective and they depend from individual to individual, and everybody has some kind of rationalization. Some people go beyond rationalization and use logic and use facts and evidence to support their claims on their moral stances on these issues, even in how we interact socially. This is micro-morality. And morality is always subjective, but micro-morality will never, ever be objective because it depends on how your worldview is. And it's why we have personality clashes, because we have an expectation of how a person is to conduct themselves in the world around us, and because that expectation differs from person to person, you can never call micro-morality objective in any way, shape, or form. It is always going to be subjective. So yes, morality is subjective. We have universally agreed on macro morality, so we can call it objective if you like, objective morality. We have subjectively as a society agreed that they're morally incorrect, and that's why we can call it objectively immoral, but ultimately the morality in general, especially micro, it's always going to be subjective. Always. Morality is subjective. So yes, the reason why we don't go around raping, plundering, and pillaging and murdering each other is due to a little thing called empathy and sympathy, and our ability to recognize each other and understand the meaning of life and its importance. And that's why we don't do it. It's not because of a biblical text that was written. These texts were written with the premise in mind that has already been concluded by philosophers post-Christianity. I'm sorry, not post, pre-Christianity. Before Christianity, before Judaism showed up, these tenets of philosophy, don't murder, don't rape, were already being taught because we didn't want that to happen to ourselves. And we find it across the board and amongst society, from other cultures across the globe. How interesting is that? But one thing we have not seemed to agree on across the globe: promiscuity, monogamy, polygamy. These are all subjective. Morality itself is subjective. If we look in the animal kingdom, animals fight, they kill each other, etc. We have decided to go above and beyond that, and that ultimately is what makes the human species unique. It is not how much things we have in common with animals. It's not saying, well, we do things like animals, but the thing that really makes the human species unique is that we do things that are not natural. That's what makes us unique. We go beyond the natural. It's not natural to use technology, to use the phone, to watch TV, to play video games, to have steel implants in our bodies. We can make people who are born deaf hear again. We can make the blind see again. These are not natural. We have done this. We have invented a very interesting, very complicated code of language, a way of communication beyond any other animal species. And don't give me that dolphin shit. Everybody says that. I think that's a misconception to all hell. So I wanted to point this out so I could ultimately come down with the full conclusion. Guess what? Morality is subjective. And I find it weird that people cannot wrap their head around that morality is subjective, that mankind created morality, and it's not a bad thing that we created morality. If we hadn't created morality, we would be just like animals. We'd be raping, pillaging, looting, killing, all kinds of stuff that you don't want to do. We'd be living in anarchy. So, that being said, let me know what you think in the comments section below. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell button on any channel you subscribe to. And with